Okay, so we are reading the Celestine Prophecy by James Redfield. We are in the second chapter, The Longer Now, page 43 of the book and page 22 of the PDF.
The plane tilted forward and began its descent as the flight attendant announced that we would soon be landing in Lima. I gave Dobson the name of my hotel and asked where he was staying. He gave me the name of his hotel and said it was only a couple of miles from mine. "What is your plan?" I asked. "I've been thinking about that," he replied. "The first thing, I guess, is to visit the American embassy and tell them why I'm here, just for the record." "Good idea." "After that, I'm going to speak with as many Peruvian scientists as I can. The scientists at the University of Lima have already told me that they have no knowledge of the manuscript, but there are other scientists who are working at various ruins who may be willing to talk. What about you? What are your plans?" "I have none," I replied. "Do you mind if I tag along?" "Not at all. I was going to suggest it." After the plane landed, we picked up our luggage and agreed to meet later at Dobson's hotel. I walked outside and hailed a taxi in the fading twilight. The air was dry and the wind was brisk. As my cab drove away, I noticed another taxi pull out quite quickly behind us, then lag back in the traffic. It stayed with us through several turns, and I could make out a lone figure in the back. A rush of nervousness filled my stomach. I asked the driver, who could speak English, not to go directly to the hotel, but to drive around for a while. I told him I was interested in sightseeing. He complied without comment. The taxi followed. What was this all about? When we arrived at my hotel, I told the driver to stay in the car. Then I opened my door and pretended to be paying the fare. The taxi following behind us pulled up to the curb some distance away, and the man stepped out and walked slowly towards the hotel entrance. I jumped back into the vehicle and shut the door, telling the cabby to drive on. As we sped away, the man walked into the street and watched us until we were out of sight. I could see my driver's face in the rearview mirror. He was watching me closely, his expression tense. "Sorry about this," I said. "I've decided to change accommodations." I struggled to smile, then gave him the name of Dobson's Hotel, although part of me wanted to go straight to the airport and take the first plane back to the States.
So anyone would get nervous in this kind of a situation.
A half block short of our destination, I had the driver pull up. "Wait here," I told him. "I'll be right back." The streets were filled with people, mostly native Peruvians, but here and there I passed some Americans and Europeans. Something about seeing the tourists made me feel safer. When I was within 50 yards of the hotel, I stopped. Something wasn't right. Suddenly, as I watched, gunshots rang out and screams filled the air. The crowd in front of me flung themselves to the ground, opening up my view down the sidewalk. Dobson was running towards me, wild-eyed, panicked. Figures behind him pursued. One fired his gun into the air and ordered Dobson to halt.
So again,
As he
Shimangla, you have to shut your other computer. Have you got both your computers on?
No.
So why is the voice echoing? Anyway, so
Nothing.
now what is happening here is that he got an instinct and he stopped 50 yards short of Dobson's hotel because you see we have this innate sense to sense the danger provided we start listening to this instinct. Once we start listening, then we can actually see, what is happening.
As he ran closer, Dobson strained to focus, then recognized me. "Run," he yelled. "For God's sake, run." I turned and ran down an alley in terror. Ahead was a vertical board fence, 6 feet high, blocking my way. When I reached it, I leaped as high as I could, catching the top of the boards with my hands and flinging my right leg over the top. As I pulled my leg over and dropped to the other side, I looked back down the alley. Dobson was running desperately. More shots were fired. He stumbled and fell. I continued to run blindly, leaping piles of trash and stacks of cardboard boxes. For a moment, I thought I heard footsteps behind me, but I didn't dare to look back. Ahead, the alley ran into the next street, which was also crowded with people, seemingly unalarmed. As I entered the street, I dared to glance to my rear, my heart pounding. No one was there. I walked hurriedly down the sidewalk to the right, trying to fade into the crowd. Why did Dobson run? I asked myself. Was he killed? Wait a minute, someone said in a loud whisper from behind my left shoulder. I started to run, but he reached out and grabbed my arm. Please wait a minute, he said again. I saw what happened. I'm trying to help you. Who are you? I asked, trembling. I'm Wilson James, he said. I'll explain later. Right now, we have to get off these streets. Something about his voice and demeanor calmed my panic, so I decided to follow him. We walked up the street and into a leather goods store. He nodded to a man behind the counter and led me into a musty spare room in the back. He shut the door and closed the curtains. He was a man in his 60s, although he seemed much younger, a sparkle in his eyes or something. His skin was dark brown and his hair was black. He looked of Peruvian descent, but the English he spoke sounded almost American. He wore a bright blue t shirt and jeans.
So now this is important. Yeah? Shimangla, why is it echoing?
I
A
can't hear.
sparkle, a sparkle in his eyes or something. Now this is important. When you look into the eyes of a person, you can read a lot about a person. And especially when you see a spiritual person, there's a difference in the eye. In the morning, just look in the mirror and look into your eyes in the first thing in the morning, and you will see that there'll be changes in the way that the eye sparkles. And over a period of time, you'll be able to start assessing what your day is going to be like just by seeing your eyes in the morning. Just start trying it, and you'll see that you can actually see it. I see it all the time, personally speaking. When there's a sparkle, I know that something, there's something intelligent, something, some knowledge or something or the other good is going to happen, some uplifting thing. When it is dull, I know that the day is going to be a little like, theek hai, wahi wala day, like that. So you can actually read. And especially when you see a spiritual person, you can see into the eyes. There's a stillness which comes in the eyes, as if the person is here, but he's not here at the same time. Okay. So you can read a lot from the eyes. So he says over here, sparkle in his eyes or something. So naturally, the bright eyes, that something good is going to kind of happen.
You'll be safe here for a while, he said. Why are they chasing you? I didn't respond. You're here about the manuscript, aren't you? He asked. How did you know that? I guess the man with you was here for that reason too. Yes, his name is Dobson. How did you know there were two of us? I have a room over the alley. I was looking out the window as they were chasing you. Did they shoot Dobson? I asked, terrified by what I might hear in reply. I don't know, he said. I couldn't tell. But once I saw you had escaped, I ran down the back steps to head you off. I thought perhaps I could help. Why? For an instant, he looked at me as though he was uncertain how to answer my question. Then his expression changed to one of warmth. You won't understand this, but I was standing there at the window and thoughts about an old friend came to me. He's dead now. He died because he thought people should know about the manuscript. When I saw what was happening in the alley, I felt I should help you.
So again,
He was
coincidence. Okay, coincidence happened. He thought about his friend at that very moment. How did that thought come? And he acted on that particular thought. So again, this becomes extremely important, that when we are getting these intuitions or something comes from below the line, we need to start paying attention.
He was right. I didn't understand, but I had the feeling he was being absolutely truthful with me. I was about to ask another question when he spoke again. We can talk about this later, he said. I think we'd better move to a safer place. Wait a minute, Wilson, I said. I just want to find a way back to the States. How can I do this? Call me Will, he replied. I don't think you should try the airport, not yet. If they're still looking for you, they will be checking there. I have some friends who live out of town. They will hide you. There are several other ways out of the country you can choose. When you're ready, they will show you where to go. He opened the door to the room and checked inside the shop, then walked outside and checked the street. When he returned, he motioned for me to follow. We walked down the street to a blue jeep that Will pointed out. As we got in, I noticed that the back seat was carefully packed with foodstuffs and tents and satchels, as if for an extended trip. We rode in silence. I leaned back in the passenger seat and tried to think. My stomach was knotted with fear. I had never expected this. What if I had been arrested and thrown into a Peruvian jail or killed outright? I had to size up my situation. I had no clothes, but I did have money and one credit card, and for some reason I trusted Will.
So again, he was operating in the left side of the grid, but then he shifted into the right side of the grid by saying that, okay, what do I have? What can I be grateful for? And that's when the shift started taking place.
What had you, and who was it, Dobson, done to get those people after you? Will asked suddenly. Nothing that I know of, I replied. I met Dobson on the plane. He's an historian and he was coming down here to investigate the manuscript officially. He represents a group of other scientists. Will looked surprised. Did the government know he was coming? Yes, he had written certain government officials that he wanted cooperation. I can't believe they tried to arrest him. He didn't even have his copies with him. He has copies of the manuscript? Only of the first two insights. I had no idea there were copies in the United States. Where did he get them? On an earlier trip, he was told a certain priest knew of the manuscript. He couldn't find him, but he found the copies hidden behind his house. Will looked sad. Jose. Who? I asked. He was the friend I told you about, the one who was killed. He was adamant that as many people as possible hear about the manuscript. What happened to him? He was murdered. We don't know by whom. His body was found in the forest miles from his house, but I think it was his enemies. The government? Certain people in the government or in the church. His church would go that far? Perhaps. The church is secretly against the manuscript. There are a few priests who understand the document and advocate it covertly, but they must be careful. Jose talked of it openly to anyone who wanted to know. I warned him for months before his death to be more subtle, to stop giving copies to anyone who came along. He told me he was doing what he knew he must. When was the manuscript first discovered? I asked. It was first translated 3 years ago, but no one knows when it was first discovered. The original floated around for years, we think, among the Indians, until it was found by Jose. He alone managed to get it translated. Of course, once the church found out what the manuscript said, they tried to suppress it totally. Now all we have are copies. We think they destroyed the original. Will had driven east out of town, and we were riding on a narrow 2-lane road through a heavily irrigated area. We passed several small plank dwellings and then a large pasture with expensive fencing. Did Dobson tell you about the first two insights? Will asked. He told me about the second insight, I replied. I have a friend who told me of the first. She talked to a priest at another time. To Jose, I guess. Do you understand these two insights? I think so. Do you understand that chance encounters often have a deeper meaning? It seems, said, like this whole trip has been one coincidental event after another.
So again,
That,
we have to
that
pay attention to all chance encounters. Why are we meeting? What is the reason behind our meeting? Nothing happens by chance. Everything has a design. Okay. So the more attention we pay, the more coincidences we start seeing in our life, the more spontaneity starts to come into our life.
that begins to happen once you become alert and connected with the energy. Connected? Will smiled. That's something mentioned further in the manuscript. I'd like to hear about it, I said. Let's talk about it later, he said, indicating with a nod that he was turning the vehicle onto a gravel driveway. 100 feet ahead was a modest wood frame house. Will pulled up beneath a large tree to the right of the house and stopped. My friend works for the owner of a large farming estate who owns much of the land in this area, he said, and provides this house. The man is very powerful and secretly supportive of the manuscript. You'll be safe here. A porch light flicked on, and a short, squat man, who appeared to be a native Peruvian, rushed out, smiling broadly and saying something enthusiastically in Spanish. When he reached the jeep, he patted Will on the back through the open window and glanced pleasantly over at me. Will asked him to speak in English, then introduced us. He needs a little help, Will said to the man. He wants to return to the States, but he'll have to be very careful. I guess I'm going to leave him with you. The man was looking closely at Will. You're about to go after the ninth insight, aren't you? He asked.
So again,
Yes,
this man was also intuitive. Okay. So he could actually guess what the intent of Will was.
yes, Will said, getting out of the jeep. I opened my door and walked around the vehicle. Will and his friend were strolling towards the house, having a conversation I couldn't hear. As I walked up, the man said, I will start the preparations, then walked away. Will turned to me. What did he mean? I asked. When he questioned you about the ninth insight, there is a part of the manuscript that has never been found. There were 8 insights with the original text, but one more insight. The ninth was mentioned there. Many people have been searching for it. Do you know where it is? No, not really. Then how are you going to find it? Will smiled. The same way Jose found the original 8. The same way you found the first 2 and then ran into me. If one can connect and build up enough energy, then coincidental events begin to happen consistently.
So again, what happens? As you build up your energy, the field increases and you're open to listening to the universe, and that is when the coincidence start happening. So building up of your energy is very important. This is the very thing that in all Monroe exercises, the first one of the first steps in the preparatory process is the resonant tuning. That it resonant tuning and humming for that matter helps in build up our resilience, helps in build up our energy field so that we can go into those expanded states with energy around us. Okay. So like here, the more energized we become, the more connected we become, and the more we can actually start to perceive.
Tell me how to do that, I said. Which insight is it? Will looked at me as if assessing my level of understanding. How to connect is not just one insight, it's all of them. Remember, in the second insight, where it describes how explorers would be sent out into the world, utilizing the scientific method to discover the meaning of human life on the planet, but they would not return right away. Yes, well, the remainder of the insights represents the answers finally coming back, but they aren't just coming from institutional science. The answers I'm talking about are coming from many different areas of inquiry. The findings of physics, psychology, mysticism, and religion are all coming together into a new synthesis based on a perception of the coincidences.
So again, science and spirituality are meeting one another. There's a conjunction taking place between science and spirituality.
We're learning the details of what the coincidences mean, how they work, and as we do, we're constructing a whole new view of life, insight by insight. Then I want to hear about each insight, I said. Can you explain them to me before you go? I found it doesn't work that way. You must discover each one of them in a different way.
So again, what
How?
happens over here, he is very clearly saying that one step at a time. So as your field grows, as your knowledge grows, as your state of consciousness grows, the unfolding starts to take place.
It just happens. It wouldn't work for me to just tell you. You might have the information about each of them, but you won't have the insights. You have to discover them in the course of your own life.
So now this is the distinction or the difference between knowledge and experience. That leads to wisdom. So you may have the knowledge, you may have all the insights written, but you can't decipher them because you don't understand, have not experienced what the insights mean. So when you go through it in a step by step method, in a progressive manner, that is when the understanding of all the insights take place.
We stared at each other in silence. Will smiled. Talking with him made me feel incredibly alive.
So now
Why
what
are you going?
again over here, one second. Over here, talking with him made me feel incredibly alive. So when you're talking to someone who is highly energized or is operating at a higher state of consciousness and you connect with that person, automatically your state of energy and your state of consciousness starts to shift. This is the reason also that every time a highly spiritual person comes, you go and sit in the presence of that person because they uplift you.
We stared at each other in silence. Will smiled. Taking with him, to- sorry, Talking with him made me feel incredibly alive. Why are you going after the ninth insight now? I asked. It's the right time. I have been a guide here and I know the terrain and I understand all eight insights. When I was at my window over the alley, thinking of Jose, I had already decided to go north one more time. The ninth insight is out there. I know it. And I'm not getting any younger.
So one second.
Besides,
The ninth insight is out there and I know it. So he was feeling it in his gut. He was feeling that yes, it is out there and I need to go after it.
I know it. And I'm not getting any younger. Besides, I've envisioned myself finding it and achieving what it says. I know it is the most important of the insights. It puts all the others into perspective and gives us the true purpose of life. He paused suddenly, looking serious. I would have left 30 minutes earlier, but I had this nagging feeling that I had forgotten something. He paused again. That's precisely when you showed up.
So now this is also important. We have to pay attention to these feelings that we get. And the more aware we become, because each of these things have a tasir, you'll be able to sense it, right? And when that feeling comes, that tasir comes, we need to pay attention and act on what that feeling is generating within us. So he acted. So that nagging feeling that something is missing. Okay. So then you stop, you cool down, you pay attention again, and you'll find most of the time it will pop up into your consciousness.
We looked at each other for a long time. You think I'm supposed to go with you? I asked. What do you think? I don't know, I said, unsure of myself. I felt confused. The story of my Peruvian trip was flashing before my mind. Charlene, Dobson, now Will. I had come to Peru because of a mild curiosity, and now I find myself in hiding, an unwitting fugitive who didn't even know who his pursuers were. And the strangest thing of all was that at this moment, instead of being terrified, totally panicked, I found myself in a state of excitement. I should have been summoning all my wits and instincts to find a way home. But what I really wanted to do was to go with Will into what would undoubtedly be more danger.
So a sense of knowing again, okay, a sense of deep knowing that your brain says something, but your heart says something else. And generally speaking, in these situations, 9 out of 10 times the heart seems to be the right thing. That's what my experience is, at least.
I don't know, I said, unsure of myself. Oh, sorry. As I considered my options, I realized that in reality I had no choice. The second insight had ended any possibility of going back to my old preoccupations. If I was going to stay away, I had to go forward. I plan to spend the night, Will said. So you will have until tomorrow morning to decide. I've already decided, I told him. I want to go.
So he took a very clear. I think we can stop here today because we'll go into a new chapter otherwise for 2 minutes. Anyone, anything to say? Anyone, anything to say?
It's very interesting, Niket, to understand how, human minds, and it's quite interesting.
Yeah, actually, it's a one step. It's a very
Yeah.
it's a story, right? But the insights are
Hmm.
very important. The first insight was everyone's getting restless and coincidences are
Hmm.
taking place. The second insight is that you're again focusing on that thing, that feeling that you're getting inside. Okay, and then you're moving with it, and also the connection with history, connection with the past.
Yeah.
So everything is building on everything else, right?
Hmm.
Where
Hmm.
we came from, that becomes important. How fast things are moving. So one thing leads to the other.
And also the universe sends us messages which if we are aware, then we can listen to
Absolutely,
those.
101%. The
So that
messages
was, yeah.
always come. It's only that we don't pay attention, and
Yeah, right.
we are not open to that experience. Plus, what
Hmm.
happens is what we think is right for us. Most of the time, it may not be right for us. So when we go into that,
Because we don't want to agree now to that.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
We are
So
looking at some other answers.
yeah,
Yeah.
so we are in resistance most of the time. We
Right.
are in resistance rather than going with the flow. We are resisting the flow most of the time. Okay, anyone else,
Interesting.
anything?
Thank you.
Otherwise we can wrap up. We'll meet for meditation at 3:45. Good to see
Hello.
you, Ritu.
Thank you.
Ram
Hi,
Ram.
Priya.
Ram.
Thank you,
Ram.
Ram Ram.
Book reading
Bhaiya,
people have.
I would like to thank Mukuldi for suggesting the movie Yes Man. It was really nice, and I was remembering you also.
So you have to thank Niket. Yeah, he's the one who
No,
told.
no, you spoke about it, and while watching the movie, I was remembering Niket Bhaiya, because that guy keeps saying yes and bhaiya, and I was remembering all bhaiya's words coming to my mind. When opportunity presents itself, you have to be willing to say yes.
Yes, yes, true.
And I was laughing कि हर चीज में yes बोलने से क्या हो रहा है.
No, because I
Like
don't know
9
what
out of 10 times you will gain.
God
Okay?
is so right. God was
Maybe
anyway.
10% you'll have your chips.
No, it was really nice, really, really.
Yeah.
Thank
It's
you.
a funny movie.
It
It's a
was
nice
done from Apollo, I
Yeah.
believe. God's test was done from Apollo.
Ah.
Oh.
Okay, so then see you all for meditation.
Ram Ram.
Ram,
Thank
Ram,
you,
Ram.
Ram Ram. Ram Ram.
Ram Ram Bhaiya. Ram Ram Bhaiya.